Hi, I'm Sasan Kasravi. This is Proteus Debate Academy. We've been a YouTube channel that for the past 5 or 6 years has been making free, high quality coaching content for coaches and for competitors who don't have access to high quality coaches. We make a lot of stuff by request. You should let us know what you want to see. And this video I've been trying to make for at least 2 years, and I'll get stuck between like having a super ambitious high video editing version of it and then being too busy with work or hobbies or other stuff and it just getting never finished, or starting to just do what I'm about to attempt to do and feeling halfway through that it's way too boring. But if you're watching this, I finally did it. So what are we doing? I am going to be showing you my process for cutting a Lincoln Douglas case from start to finish. And I'm going to be showing the whole thing. Hopefully, I can keep this to under a couple hours. This is going to be on the Septober 2022 LD topic about healthcare. So if you are looking for like what I think the affirmative should say, this will be a great video. And at the end of the video, you will have access, not at the end of the video, it should be in the description or in the like a pinned comment or something, where I'll have a link to the case that we're about to cut. And you can use that for practices, for tournaments, for whatever you like. That's just an open source thing. I suspect that the usefulness of this video will outlive that specific topic. So my focus is going to be talking more generally about how to make a good debate case and what I'm doing, and less focused on nuances of the healthcare topic that I don't think are super important beyond just building a case. Okay, let's go ahead and get this antique on the road show. We got me over here. So you're going to be able to see me and everything that I'm doing in a little document over here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start this conversation as though you have never made a debate case before, but I also assure you that the usefulness of this is going to, that there's going to be things that even if you've made many debate cases, might be different than how you do it, might be a good perspective. I don't know. So let's go ahead and get started. I like to use Google Docs. You are going to want some sort of word processor. That can be Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word has a lot of tools that people find useful for making cases. I'm going to be using some tools that are in this little extension section, but I don't really like to use a lot of them. Regardless, Microsoft Word costs money. I'm no longer a student, so I don't have a discount, so I don't have Microsoft Word. I also find that Google Docs, just being a more universal format, makes it easier to share stuff, and that's why I use it. But there's no real reason behind that. You're going to want to title your case something that's going to be easy to find in a few months. The reason for that is because if you're doing debate well, you're going to be keeping all of your cases, because there's arguments in there, especially like impact arguments, that are like evergreen, like they're always going to be useful to you. So you're going to want to be able to find them quickly, whether you are in, I don't know, in prep or getting ready for a tournament or just trying to write a new case. And so just calling it like AF is not going to be useful, because even in your first year of debating, you're going to have a million AF cases. You might have multiple AF cases on this topic. So I am just going to call this the Proteus LD Affirmative Septober 2022. Unmistakably what this case is, unless I have multiple LD apps, in which case I'll go back and title them with whatever's different about them. And I'm pretty sure we've already burned a lot of time. Okay, So where are we going to go ahead and get started? Well, we have a little video I made a long time ago that talks about writing arguments from the bottom up. Let's start with what we're not going to write. We're going to go ahead and grab the topic, put that on top. I always just look up NSDA topic, find this page, and then the Lincoln Douglas one is right on top. Gonna come over here. I do a lot of Control Shift paste, which pastes it without the formatting, so instead of it showing up like that, it shows up like this. That's gonna be more important when we're cutting like articles and stuff. So I like to get that on top. Definitions, you don't need any. This is not the time. Value criterion, skip it. All of the stuff that we would call top of case is contextualizing the debate for your judge, contextualizing your case. So a definition doesn't matter if your case doesn't rely on the judge knowing that definition, or if you don't think there's going to be some sort of conflict between you and your opponent about that definition. We don't have a case yet, so we don't know what our case is going to need. Similarly, it doesn't make any sense to be like, what is a good value? I made another video called like value criterions are useless or something like that. But the short version of it is that it's not a good approach to be like, what is a good value for this topic? And then trying to find arguments that tailor to that, because you want to follow the research and you want to follow like whatever the best impacts are. And after that, you'll be like, okay, do I need any specific kind of value, mostly to like make up for something that my case lacks? But doesn't matter. You don't know what your case is yet, so you don't know how you want the judge to evaluate it. It doesn't exist. So we're going to start with our criterions, but not our criterions, our contentions. But before we get into the contentions, we have to decide what contentions we're going to try to research. And maybe we'll pick one of these and we'll hit a wall in the research. But the way we do it, there's a video, right? I mentioned this, writing arguments from the bottom up. What does that mean? That means you think of the impacts first. Impacts are the most important thing in debate. The impacts are what actually make you win a debate round. When a judge is voting in a debate round, they're voting on an impact. So your goal is to reach your impact at the end of the debate, convince your judge that your impact happens, and then to outweigh with your impact, to show that your impact is more important than your opponent's impacts. And so there are some impacts that aren't really ever useful because they're never really going to outweigh the average impact. So a lot of people start with debate and they're like, hey, here's my argument, especially in something that's like a little bit more like ethics driven, like LD. They'd be like, this is the argument I want to make, and then the last thing they do is they tack on an impact if they even remember to do that, and they'll be like, and my impact is that this is what the founding fathers would have wanted, which isn't a good impact. Like, it's not going to outweigh anything, right? Like, hopefully that doesn't need a lot of explaining, but there are 6 or 7 impacts that are consistently very good. And the reason why is because usually they relate in some way to high numbers of death. There's a little bit of chopping there, but I'm not lagging. This is good. Okay. So, what are they? Well, you will develop your own set of impacts that you like, that you've done a lot of research on, that you really like to talk about. And the cool thing about impacts is they don't change from topic to topic. Like why poverty is bad and how poverty affects your health doesn't differ based on whether you're talking about space or you're talking about like high-speed rail. So you get to use those arguments all the time. And this technique of starting from the bottom up is really essential in parliamentary debate. I have been a parley coach for 8 years at a pretty high level, and you need to make a decision. You get the topic and you have 20 minutes to like research and write your case, but you have to make a decision on what your arguments are going to be within about 90 seconds. And so the way to do that is to have a set of impacts that you like in mind and try to determine which of those you have decent access to with this topic. So, off the top of my head, some good impacts are the economy, which I don't particularly like talking about because I don't really understand economics. It doesn't seem real. Poverty, which is different than economics. Um, Poverty is more focused on like a poverty impact is more focused on the people who are already in or are susceptible to poverty and the like effects that has. And economy impact is more focused on like our GDP getting hurt. And that sounds very similar and kind of is, but suffice it to say that you can have a strong economy and people are still in poverty. So a different one would be like nuclear war, very popular in debate. There's conventional war. There is public health. It's probably going to be an important one. This is like, for example, pandemic preparedness. That's something that we talked about in debate well before the pandemic happened. What else? Public health, environment is a huge one. There's more, but let's just look at these for now. So the first thing we have to determine is which of these we have strong links into. In other words, we have this topic here and we have an impact here. And if there is some piece of evidence that connects these two, that says implementing a single payer universal healthcare system affects the economy either positively if you're the affirmative or negatively if you're the negative, that piece of evidence is what we call a link. And that is also a term that we use in like advantage structure, which we also have a video on, and you should watch because that's what I'm going to be using here. Now, there are economic links to universal healthcare and all of that stuff. A reason I don't want to use an economy argument for this topic at this particular time is because there's so much stuff going on with like inflation and Ukraine and Russia and the infrastructure, whatever, and that's all just complicated stuff I don't want to deal with. So, in other words, advantage structure says that I'm going to start any of these arguments by describing the status quo. And I don't want to wade through the status quo of how the economy is doing. So I'm not going to do that. Poverty, though, seems really good. I happen to know a little bit about this topic. And if you don't know anything about the topic, you might start doing some light reading. But a lot of the point of this process is to skip like reading the entire Wikipedia article or 6 articles and watching like 5 videos just to sort of get a sense of what the topic is about. I know enough to know that medical cost is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States, and that single payer healthcare seeks to alleviate that problem. So I know that poverty is going to be a good argument. I might just write one contention and have that be my whole case. I might have 2 contentions. I would say, generally speaking, you want to go for 2 contentions. And you want to find a balance of 2 different impacts. Why? Why 2 different impacts? Why not have 2 contentions that have the same impact? Because the point of what we're doing is we are trying to set you up for the end of the debate, right? A debate is not a case writing competition. It's a debate case comparison competition. And if you only have one impact for multiple contentions, that makes your opponent's job easier because they only have to beat one argument, right? They only have to outweigh one impact. So what you want is you want to have a variety and you want them to balance each other out in some way. So for example, the poverty impact is has a pretty high probability, right? Maybe it doesn't have the same magnitude as nuclear war, but it's going to have a much higher probability of happening. So um, knowing that, maybe the second contention is going to have a higher impact, or sorry, higher magnitude impact and a lower probability. Um, or depending on the time frame, right? Like whether if my first impact is really good, but it's something that's not going to happen for a long time, I might balance that with a second contention that talks about something that is going to happen very immediately, even if it isn't as significant. And as you go through the debate, that'll give you the option of making a choice about which direction you want to take the debate in the end. So for now, we have poverty, nuclear war. I don't think there's a strong link. Conventional war. I don't think there's a strong link. Environment, there might be something there, right? And one of the way I recommend doing research on a topic you don't know much about is something like this, right? Like instead of just looking up Medicare for all, I would look up the topic and the impact that you're going to go for together, and you might find something interesting like this 2020 article that talks about how there's climate implications to single payer healthcare. I'm not going to read through all of this because it's not the argument I'm going to go for, but if you want something a little bit more tricksy or unique, you might even look up like Medicare for all or single payer healthcare, and then be like nuclear war, and see if we can find anything. Medicare for all or endless war. So this piece of evidence might indicate that these things somehow trade off, and that if we get Medicare for all, we might cut nuclear programs, which I don't think is a good strategy to go for in this debate for a lot of reasons I won't get into. That just, yeah, whatever. We won't waste time with that. But that's how you find effective stuff rather than just trying to read about Medicare for all, because the impact framing might not come up in that very broad top level research. So yeah, the other argument that we're going to look for is public health. And now that we know, we're going to isolate these out and make our two contentions. First thing we're going to want to do is outline them, which, if you know advantage structure, is an extremely quick process. I know exactly what pieces of evidence I need to find, because advantage structure tells me that when I'm talking about a poverty argument, right, the implication being that Medicare for all will improve poverty. My first piece of evidence is going to be that the status quo is bad. So poverty is bad in the status quo. And then I'm going to have a piece of evidence that says Medicare for all, or single payer healthcare, let's say. Single payer healthcare. Is healthcare one word or two words, or is it never consistent? I don't know. Reduces poverty, and then third, poverty is bad. Okay. Now, I know enough. If I didn't know anything about the relationship of poverty and Medicare for all, I would just sort of start researching each one of these bullet points individually and try to find evidence that supports each one. As you find that research, you might go back and change these to be more specific and nuanced. So, for example, I know that my poverty is bad in the status quo is that medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. And now I can say reduces medical costs. And that is my whole argument. So for the public health one, I might say public health is bad in the United States. I will say single payer healthcare will improve public health, and public health is important. Just because I know a little bit more about this topic, I know that like there's a lot of public health is bad in the United States arguments. Like the United States spends more on healthcare, like the government, not just the United States. Well, I don't know if it's the government spending or if it's each individual person, whatever. The point is, we spend a lot on healthcare and we have really bad health outcomes. So that is definitely something that I'm going to talk about if I can argue, if I can find evidence that argues that single payer healthcare resolves this. Another thing that I happen to know is pandemic preparedness. That that argument might not be that strong just because of how like globalized. Well, I don't know. Like I don't know if some countries just did better with the pandemic. I think they did. I think the United States had like a disproportionately high amount of deaths because of the pandemic and because of not having socialized healthcare. So that would basically be the argument. And I might have, let's say, 2 poverty is bad impact cards or something like that. I might have like 2 public health is important cards. So I might have like public health is important and another pandemic is likely and would be very bad if we are not prepared. Something like that. We are not currently prepared for a pandemic. So really it's 3 parts, and I have weird light on my face now because the sun just poked out of the clouds. That's okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are just going to search for this evidence. And what I might do is I might, let's see, move this over here and then this guy here, right? Okay. Follow me on this one. We'll make you a little bit more narrow. And okay. Go ahead and that is way too big. I need to make it smaller so you can see. Still too big. What can I do? This should help, but they are both still very large. Okay. Wow, I hate this. Maybe if I make these more narrow. And now I can. Okay, great. So hopefully these will be, somewhat possible to see and read and look at while I am working on them. Okay. So on the left, you're going to be able to see my case as I'm working on it. On the right, you're going to see the research I'm doing. So I'm going to look this way, see what I'm looking for, and then look forward over here. Okay. So there's a lot of ways that we're going to be able to start with our research. So we might just look up the exact phrase we're looking for and probably find some good sources. Medical costs are driving millions of people into poverty. That sounds like a good argument. Let's take a look, though. We're going to look at stuff like the year, 2019, 2018, 2018, not bad. Another place that I think is really useful to look is everycrsreport.com, and I have another video on this about why I like this website. So we'll look at medical cost poverty. We don't want it to be too old. Maybe we'll look up medical bankruptcy. I saw bankruptcy? Yes. Okay. Bankruptcy and student loans, economic growth. Nah. Seems like we have a good enough source here. I don't love that this says that there's an improvement, because as the affirmative, I want to indicate that the status quo is bad because I'm the one advocating for changing the way things are. If the way things are is good, then we're not going to want to change it. If the way things are is bad, then we're going to be more inclined to accept certain risks and lower probabilities of success for a chance at improving things. Especially since this is a couple years old, I might then end up needing a separate piece of evidence that says, hey, I know my last piece of evidence said things are improving, but actually they aren't. So why bother with that? So here, results. This is from, when is this from? 2018. And the whole article is here. If it wasn't, I would just find it illegally, because copyright shouldn't be real. What does this mean? The way we finance medical care exacerbates income inequality and impoverishes millions of Americans. This regressive financial pattern improved minimally in the wake of Obamacare. Okay. Okay. This is really long. But we probably just want this section. Okay, here we go. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to call this Contention One, poverty. And I'm going to change the numbering system here. And give myself a little bit of space. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy this entire discussion section and paste it into here. And I'm going to make it a little smaller, even though I doubt you're going to be able to read it anyway. This is not going to be helping. But let's see. Okay. Here comes the part where I just read. I'm going to bold and underline any part that seems important. And my goal here is not to summarize the article. My goal is to identify all of the parts that support my claim. that support that medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. And anything else, I'm not worried about. So let's take a look. So this part is really quotable, really important, really useful. The next part talks specifically about what insurance companies could be doing. This article is not about single payer healthcare. No part. It might be that no part of this article even mentions single payer healthcare as the solution to this. That's going to be our next piece of evidence. So we're not going to really be quoting the parts that are like, and here is what insurance companies can do. Now, that might be useful to a negative team or negative debater, I guess, since it's one-on-one, in order for them to demonstrate that there's alternatives. But generally speaking, all you need to show is that right now, all we're worried about strategically is being better than the status quo, not being better than some alternative that the negative might talk about. Okay. And here, I'm not worried about quoting an entire sentence, but in fact, I'm not really worried right now about how it reads at all. But just know you don't have to quote an entire sentence. Wait. So actually, there is some stuff in here about why. So this isn't really as specific as I want it to be. It just says that they're driven into poverty. I might use a second piece of, like a second card, just for some more like details, because what we want is metrics that we're going to be able to use to quantify our impacts later. Because if we're talking about like how many people get put into poverty because of this, or how many people lose their jobs because of that thing. Like, we want to be able to have a number to compare. So, but this is still a useful card. Okay. So here we have a cutting of this piece of evidence. What am I going to do with this? How am I going to turn this into a card? Well, there's tools that will help. For this first one, we're just going to do it by hand. So I actually kind of like doing it by hand. There's parts of it that I'll kind of do faster. But the reason I like doing it by hand is because it just gives me more time to ruminate. Fun fact, the word ruminate means to chew. I like to just kind of chew on the card, think about it a little bit, how it might be useful, what I'm going to try to do with it. And a lot of times I feel like when people use tools to cut cards super, super fast, they don't become as familiar with the evidence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of our non-highlighted, non-underlined text, and I am going to decrease the font size such that it is still possible to read, but very easy for our eyes to skip past if we don't care. And we don't care. I'm also removing the line breaks. I'm not altering any of the original text. Now, sometimes people will just copy paste the quote and then say this is from this source and put the link. That's fine in some circuits and areas, but this honestly isn't hard. It just looks intimidating. So now I'm going to, like, you see this part here. Sometimes when you're cutting or looking at cut cards, you'll see this where it's like underlined and big but not bolded. That just is something that I think is going to be useful to know as the debater for maybe answering a question, or for if there's a certain kind of response to this card. The way to answer it might be in there also, but it's not necessarily the part that you're going to read out loud. So that is why I think cards are superior for your purposes. We're going to look for we're going to make a color. I like to go with, like, I don't know, let's go with, what's the Proteus color? Like something like, something like this. That's a little too dark. Makes it a little hard to read. Sure, there we go. We're going to bold this, and now we need to cite this card. So we're going to need the author's names, and if there's multiple authors, you just put the first author. Whoops. And put et al., which is Latin for and their friends. We're going to put the date it was published, which is March of 2018. Medical journals tend to publish once a month or once per quarter, so they don't always have like an exact date. We are going to put the name of the article. We're going to put the name of where it was published, which in this case might be easier to just type out. The National Library. Actually, this might have been published in something else, and it's just online on this resource. But yes, the American Journal of Public Health. These are things that don't matter, but I don't know. I think they're fun. I don't know why. The American Journal of Public Health, and the last thing that we need is a link. And at the end, I like to, and you'll see this a lot also, put initials there. That means that I, Sasan Kasravi, cut this card. This is useful because if you are on a debate team, you should be sharing your cards with your teammates. Share your evidence, share your resources. That is the biggest advantage that people with teammates have over people without teammates. And a lot of times I see teams that could be sharing their cases and working together sort of all do their own thing, and you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. On my college team, which I'm now no longer coaching, I moved to New York, they're in California, but Paul's still coaching them, so it's kind of like our channels team. I don't know. We will have like one main affirmative case for the entire LD squad. Individuals will have their own version of it, but it's usually mainly one argument. I mean, they'll have several, but they all have access to the same arguments, and we develop them together. And that way, you can go to a tournament and you do 6 rounds, and 3 of them are on the AF, so you get 3 chances to test this case, see what works, see what doesn't. But if you have 4 teammates and they all do it, now instead of 3 chances to get feedback on the case, you get 12. So it's just, you improve your debate cases way faster. Okay, so this is our first card, and we are going to bold, underline, highlight the author and the year, or sometimes just the last 2 digits of the year, depending on if you're fancy and cool. And the way I would read this now as a script would be 1. I like to number my arguments. I just makes it easier because everyone be like the 5th card rather than trying to remember all the names or whatever. But okay. Contention 1, poverty. 1. Or you could say first. Medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. Christopher et al., 2018. In the United States, most insured families pay premiums, deductibles, and co-payments that are not scaled to income. As a result, medical care expenses exacerbate poverty and income inequality, which are key social determinants of health. Out-of-pocket health care expenditures are likely to drive many families into poverty. In some nations, the wealthy pay a larger share of their income towards healthcare than do the poor. In others, health expenditures account for a similar share of income, the rich and the poor. I don't want to include that. That's kind of redundant and not really helping me. So we're going to take that out, make this small. In some nations, the wealthy pay a larger share of their income towards healthcare than the poor. In the United States, health expenses exact a higher toll. In fact, I don't even need this part. I might leave it bolded. In the United States, expenses exact a higher toll from the poor, whereas the wealthy pay relatively little. This regressive financing pattern helps shield the wealthy from demands for a fairer health financing pattern. And I might just take out that because I think that makes it read kind of awkwardly. So now it just says helps shield the wealthy from demands for fairer health financing. And I can change the phrasing of it for two reasons. One, I'm not altering the meaning of the evidence, right? I'm not making a claim that the authors wouldn't agree with, which is the important thing to keep in mind, right? You don't want to misrepresent what the evidence is intending to say. The other reason I can do that is because, well, the original phrasing is right there. I'm not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. When I am doing Lincoln Douglas debates, I will happily share my case and just let someone read off of this as I'm going, because I'm going to say it all anyway. And it just saves them having to ask for the evidence, and it's right there, and it looks nice, and we're going to make it look pretty, and it looks very professional. Anyway, let's find a quick source that says medical costs cause bankruptcy. What is this? What's the conclusion? Okay, whatever. This is fine. Okay, so what I might do now is I'd say, in fact, medical costs are the I'm going to say biggest cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Okay. 2007, 2011, 2015. Sure, this looks good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of context before and after this, just because it's such a short snippet that I'm quoting. And I am going to, put that over here. And I'm going to leave that context in just as text for people to know. There's more context, there's other stuff. I'm not trying to take this out of context. Okay. Go. Da, 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 da. Sure, I'll leave it like that. So I'm now going to use my little extensions as a debate template. I'm going to use condense. That has a big gap that I don't like. I am going to use the shrink tool that is going to do that. And I think if I do this and hit highlight, it'll highlight the parts that I already have. Probably in like a different, oh no, it's highlighting the whole thing. Okay, so then we'll just highlight this part, but you can set it to whatever. I don't use this stuff that often because I don't cut cases that often because I am not a competitor. Is this exciting or what? I'm having a good time. Okay, so the next argument is single payer healthcare reduces medical costs. Single payer universal healthcare would resolve this by reducing medical costs. So now I'm going to look up single payer healthcare would reduce medical costs. And I might even throw the word bankruptcy in there just to Medicare for All prevents medical bankruptcies. That sounds like a great source. But I want to find their sources. So healthcare reform won't fix. Hey, that sounds like a good neg argument. And that isn't found, but hey, maybe you can look for that. I don't know. All right, we're not going to use this public citizen one unless, what's over here? So I'm control Fing looking for keywords, right? It's really important for your link to use the exact language that is in the resolution because you want to show that doing the thing in the resolution specifically is the thing that I have evidence suggesting will solve the problem. Okay, 2021 uses bankruptcy, uses uninsured, uses single payer. Okay, let's see. Let's find out. Bankruptcies. Or how about bills? Cost. I'm trying to find the part where it says, hey, the cost goes down. Okay. Would reduce healthcare spending by 25%. Okay. Reducing billing expenses. Blah, 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 blah. 98% of New Yorkers would pay less for health care. Okay, cool. Though maybe I just want the economic analysis. Great. And it has parts already highlighted for us. Awesome. Here we go. Let's see. Might be easier to read here and then just highlight it here. This is talking about a state universal or single payer healthcare system. I know what you're thinking. Isn't a state smaller than the universe? It is, but that's just the wording, I guess. But yeah, so this is saying, hey, in the instance of New York, which is considering doing this, which, hey, that's good news for me because I don't have health insurance and I'm in New York. It would do a bunch of cool stuff like reduce costs and create jobs and stuff like that. And I might, like, again, I might mention that and sort of have that act as a preempt. I might just highlight it or bold and underline it without highlighting it and leave that there to serve as like a block for if they talk about the economy or jobs or whatever. Okay. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So here we're going to have to get a little fancy with the cutting here. Universal health insurance by reducing burdensome billing, expensive administrative waste, and blah, 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 and fraud. Would save over $40 billion. Would save over $40 billion. 25% would save, instead of doing $40 billion, we'll do would save. I hate that I missed. Okay. Would save 25% of doing this all on one monitor, so it's like a super small on my screen. Projected healthcare spending and savings will increase over time. Some savings, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm just kind of cutting around the part where it's talking about New York. The thing is that the New York stuff isn't really a gotcha. Like, that doesn't really discredit the argument. It's just a more objective study of a more like narrow focus. If they have cards that say this wouldn't apply everywhere and New York is a special case, congratulations. That's what debate is about. But I'm just cutting around this just to make our case as simple and easy to understand. I don't want to bog it down with, let's talk about New York, which, if I did, I would definitely like write that. I would, in this tag, be like, research on New York's proposed whatever indicates that in the case of New York, it would blah, 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 blah. But to save me having to explain all of that, over 98% would spend less on healthcare than they do now. Great. I'm going to bold and underline that, not highlight it. I'm going to come over here. We're going to condense and shrink. Okay. Oh, whoops. We forgot to cite one of our, is this also in 2013? Is this what we used? Also in, uh-oh. What is this? I feel like I'm getting dementia. Okay. Weird. Kimberly Amadeo, January 20th, 2022. Here is the thing. It's on the balance. Here is your link, and I cut it. For this one, we have Gerald Friedman, PhD, April 2015. Wow, that is a long time ago. Maybe this thing isn't actually happening. University of, oh, hold on. Pop a quick link over there. And this was also cut by me. Okay. So what do we need now? Some sort of bankruptcy is bad, poverty is bad. Okay. So a great resource always is Wikipedia. And we're going to go into poverty. We're going to look at characteristics. Um, Look at this, diseases of poverty. And we're not going to cite Wikipedia, but we are going to cite everything that, like the things that Wikipedia is citing. So I think diseases of poverty is a useful um, thing to look at because it kind of turns a lot of stuff, right? What do I mean by that? I think presumably both sides of the debate are going to be talking about health because it's a healthcare debate. And if you can show that your impact is a prior question to health, that, for example, even if the other side says that their side improves health in some way, you're going to say, like, look, the impacts of poverty on health are going to be worse than whatever benefits you're getting. Cycle of poverty. What is this? So, right, like stuff like this is super useful. Cycle of poverty. Yeah. All right. What do we have here? So here is some file that my college team threw together in 2019. And it's just a 7-page file on like just evidence on the effects of poverty. That anytime we're doing a parley debate, we don't have to do research on poverty again. So let's see here. See if we can find this. Okay. Okay. Let's take a look at our thing. Poverty is bad. So here is just a poverty is bad card. Is it the best in the world? No, but we've been going for an hour and 9 minutes, and I want to eventually finish. Okay. Yeah, that's probably all good. Okay. Good enough, right? What else do we have? US poverty statistics. Yeah. Where's the stuff that says it's actually bad? It says a lot of people live in poverty. Here we go. This is pretty good. What is this from? Is this just from Wikipedia? Air.org? What is this? Da, da, da. I don't know. What else do we have? Poverty impact. Hmm. This is why you want stuff to be labeled, but it's like 1,000 student stuff. And I'm not gonna go digging through that. How many people in the United States die from poverty? Great. it the fourth card, fifth card? Fourth card. What is soapboxy.com? Okay. Okay. See, what I'm looking for is something that paints a clear picture in compelling terms, but also isn't going to get hand waved for being like on soapboxy.com. What year is this? So Journal of Public Health, like this is already what we were looking at. Looks like a pretty '96. That's even older. All right, we're gonna go with Science Daily. This seems good enough. Let's take all of this, put her here. Is this what I already... Yes, it's... So, this is a source that is quoting the previous source that I had, which seems redundant, but I just like the phrasing more. And just everything is about what the judge is going to hear. And I just like that this is phrased in a way that contextualizes it and paints its significance in a way that's easy to digest. Okay. So they just want to be cited as Science Daily, June 18th, 2021. This very long title, once again, Science Daily, and this link. And boom. Okay, so we are now looking at a completed first contention. We have a second contention to go, and we have some top of case stuff. Let's, for now, just time this. I'm going to read this nice and slow. And a first LD speech is 7 minutes. I want the whole case to be possible to read from me in like 6 minutes. And so that would mean that this first contention really cannot afford to be longer than about 3 minutes. Ideally, I can read the whole thing at a slow pace in 2.5 minutes. Let's find out. Contention 1 is poverty. First, medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. Christopher et al. In 2018 says, in the United States, most insured families pay premiums, deductibles, and co-payments that are not scaled to income. As a result, medical care expenses exacerbate poverty and income inequality, which are key social determinants of health. Out-of-pocket healthcare expenditures are likely to drive many families into poverty. In the United States, healthcare expenses exact a higher toll from the poor, whereas the wealthy pay relatively little. This regressive financing pattern helps shield the wealthy from demands for fairer health financing. Next, in fact, medical costs are the biggest cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Amadeo in 2022 says, in 2015, medical bills, God if only, made 1 million adults declare bankruptcy. 26% of Americans age 18 to 64 struggle to pay medical bills. That's 52 million adults. 1 million declared bankruptcy that year. Next, single-payer universal health care would resolve this by reducing medical costs. Friedman in 2015 says, universal health insurance, by reducing burdensome billing expensive administrative waste in the insurance industry, monopolistic pricing of drug companies and medical devices, and fraud, would save 25% of projected healthcare spending, and savings will increase over time. Some savings will be used to finance system improvements. Even after expanding coverage to the uninsured, removing barriers to access, and correcting the underpayment of Medicaid services, the act would save nearly $2,200 per person. Furthermore, by reducing the number without health care, these improvements would save thousands of lives each year. over 98% would spend less on healthcare than they do now. Finally, poverty kills more people every year in the United States than heart disease or cancer. Science Daily in 2011. How researchers classify and quantify causes of death across a population has evolved in recent decades. In addition to long recognized physiological causes, such as heart attack and cancer, more recent research has begun to look at the contribution of social factors to U.S. mortality. In the first comprehensive analysis of such studies, researchers at Columbia University, I'm going to cut that out. Found that poverty, low levels of education, poor social support, and other social factors contribute about as many deaths in the United States as such familiar causes as heart attacks and strokes and lung cancer. The investigators found that approximately 245,000 deaths in the United States in the year 2000 were attributable to low levels of education, 176,000 to racial segregation. I'm going to cut that one out because I'm not sure that we solve for that. 162,000 to low social support. I'm going to cut that one out also. $113,000 to individual level poverty, $119,000 to income inequality, and $39,000 to area level poverty. Overall, 4.5% of U.S. deaths were found to be attributable to poverty. Okay, so that was like 4.5 minutes rather than 2.5 minutes. But some of that was me changing stuff, and the fluidity of me reading that I think is going to improve. But that's still looking like a 3-minute case or contention, which isn't the best. So now we're going to see where we can trim stuff down. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to say this is fine for now. Just because this stuff is way in the middle here and very not important, I am going to make this a little smaller just because it's bothering me that that goes over into the next page. There we go. Okay. Cool. Let's keep going. Public health. Public health is bad in the United States. You know what? I just got a text that my partner is going to be home soon. We're going to leave this one for you as homework. But okay, I don't know. That's it, right? There's the top of case, add some definitions, maybe add a contention. I think this isn't necessarily everything that I wanted it to be, but it exists. Hello, my name is Sasan, and I stand on the affirmative on the topic. Okay. Yeah. Not bad for 1 hour's work. Let's give it one more look. Whoops. Nope. Right here is fine. Okay. We'll put me over here, and we'll bring this more over, and me a little bit more, and we will read my case with a timer. Okay. Hello, my name is Sasan, and I stand on the affirmative on the topic resolved. The United States ought to implement a single payer universal healthcare system. My first contention is poverty. 1. Medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. Christopher et al., 2018. In the United States, most insured families pay premiums, deductibles, and co-payments that are not scaled to income. As a result, medical care expenses exacerbate poverty and income inequality, which are key social determinants of health. Out-of-pocket health care expenditures are likely to drive many families into poverty. In the United States, healthcare expenses exact a higher toll from the poor, whereas the wealthy pay relatively little. This regressive financing pattern helps shield the wealthy from demands for fairer health financing. 2. In fact, medical costs are the biggest cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Amadeo, 2022. In 2015, medical bills made 1 million adults declare bankruptcy. 26% of Americans age 18. Oh, I don't need to say this because that's redundant. Medical bill 26% of Americans age 18 to 64 struggle to pay medical bills. That's 52 million adults. 3. Single payer universal health care would resolve this by reducing medical costs. Friedman, 2015. Universal health insurance by reducing burdensome billing, expensive administrative waste in the insurance industry, monopolistic drug pricing and medical devices of drugs and medical devices, and fraud would save 25% of projected healthcare spending, and savings will increase over time. Some savings would be used to finance system improvements. Even after expanding coverage to the uninsured, removing barriers to access, and correcting the underpayment of Medicaid services, the act would save nearly $2,200 per person. Furthermore, by reducing the number without health care, these improvements would save thousands of lives each year. Over 98% would spend less on health care than they do now. 4. Poverty kills more people every year in the U.S. than heart disease or cancer. Science Daily, 2011. How researchers classify and quantify causes of death across a population has evolved in recent decades. In addition to long recognized physiological causes such as heart attack and cancer, more recent research has begun to look at the contribution of social factors to U.S. mortality. In the first comprehensive analysis of such studies, researchers at Columbia University found that poverty, low levels of education, poor social support, and other social factors contribute about as many deaths in the United States as such familiar causes as heart attack and strokes and lung cancer. The investigators found that approximately 245,000 deaths in the United States in the year 2000 were attributable to low levels of education, 133,000 to individual level poverty, 119,000 to income inequality, and 39,000 to area level poverty. Overall, 4.5% of US deaths were found to be attributable to poverty. That was still really long. I would probably trim this section. And so I will. Maybe we can also trim this a bit. So when you get to like this stage, really any little thing you find that can save you a few seconds is useful. My recommendation is not to read faster. Eventually, many people reach a level of debate. Not a lot of people. Eventually, some people will really reach a level of competition where, in order to get these details out in the amount of time that you have, you sort of have a agreement between your judge, who is experienced and can follow along, and your opponent, who is experienced and can follow along, to basically talk faster so that you can cover all of this information. You should not do that. You shouldn't do that. Like, you shouldn't do that until you basically can't win any other way. Brevity is much more important. Having cards that are cut very effectively is much more important. And the reason for that is because every single student I've had who has a case that timed in at 3.5 minutes when it should have been 3 minutes will say, oh, well, I'll just read it faster. And that's not good enough. Like, you need to improve the quality of these cards for clarity, for directness, for being like relevant to what you're trying to prove. And reading a bad card fast is double bad, right? It's a bad card because you haven't spent the time to really do the work I'm doing now, and you're reading it fast, which your judge almost 100% of the time cannot keep up with, isn't going to like, is going to be frustrated, is not going to like you, isn't going to be rooting for you to win. Your opponent isn't really going to understand what you're saying. It's just going to be a very unpleasant experience for everyone involved. And it happens because you are trying to circumvent the process of making a good case. Don't do that. Just make the case shorter. In fact, like, I don't think I need this. Like, this is useful, but it doesn't lead to my impacts. Like, the fact that rich people are paying less isn't going to resolve, isn't directly related to my impacts, right? It might be like a, hey, doesn't this seem unfair? But that's not the impact I'm trying to get to, so it's just not relevant to my argument. I'm trying to say right now, people are being put into poverty. This would solve it. That saves lives. Let's take out anything that isn't a part of that story. I like this explanation here. It's not strictly necessary, but I like that you're setting up early in the debate, like rethinking how we think of deaths, which I think is a very important like how we think of causes of death, which I think is really important to the affirmative story in this contention. So I really like that. And this was the whole reason I went with this article rather than the source that they are citing, because I think it contextualizes that really well. Okay. So we have this contention, we have the other contention, we have the top of case, which might include some, well, let's just throw in all of the definitions in my case. The definitions of the terms in my case should be clear through context, but I'm happy to define anything in cross-examination. Good enough. The value for today should be lives saved. Should be, I don't know, quality of life. Quality of life, life saved. Sure, lives saved. Since that's ultimately the goal of healthcare, the value criterion is just utilitarianism. What does that mean? The bottom line is that I'm going to prove that a single payer healthcare system would save a substantial number of lives that are currently being lost if my opponent can show that the status quo saves more lives then you can vote for them. Okay, here's my entire top of case. I might find a card that says, hey, when it comes to healthcare, saving lives is what matters, but I would only quote like one sentence or something like that. So with having read all of this whole thing should take me about 4 minutes, which will leave me with plenty of time for like a 3-minute contention on the next pandemic, and also for like time for things to go wrong, time for me to trip up on something or get confused or be nervous or whatever, right? Time to go really slow if my judge needs me to go extra slow, whatever. You don't want to have to rush. It just isn't good. Okay, so let's give this one more shot. We're going to try to do it in 4 minutes without going quickly. Hello, my name is Sasan, and I stand on the affirmative on the topic. Resolved, the United States ought to implement a single-payer universal healthcare system. The definitions of the terms in my case should be clear through context, but I'm happy to define anything in cross-examination. The value for today should be lives saved, since that's ultimately the goal of healthcare. The value criterion is just utilitarianism. The bottom line is that you should vote for the advocacy that saves the most lives. I'm going to prove that a single-payer healthcare system would save a substantial number of lives that are currently being lost. If my opponent can show that the status quo saves more lives, then you can vote for them. My first contention is poverty. 1. Medical costs are a significant contributor to poverty in the status quo. Christopher et al., 2018. In the United States, most uninsured families pay premiums, deductibles, and co-payments that are not scaled to income. As a result, medical care expenses exacerbate poverty and become an income inequality, which are key social determinants of health. Out-of-pocket health care expenditures are likely to drive many families into poverty. 2. In fact, medical costs are the biggest cause of medical bankruptcy in the United States. Amadeo, 2022. In 2015, medical bills made 1 million adults declare bankruptcy. 26% of Americans age 18 to 64 struggle to pay medical bills. That's 52 million adults. 3. Single-payer universal health care would resolve this by reducing medical costs. Friedman, 2015. Universal health insurance, by reducing billing expenses, administrative waste in insurance, industry, monopolistic pricing of drug and medical devices, and fraud, would save 25% of projected healthcare spending. And savings will increase over time. Even after expanding medical coverage to the uninsured, removing barriers to access, and correcting the underpayment of Medicaid services, the act would save nearly $2,200 per person. Furthermore, by reducing the number without health care, these improvements would save thousands of lives each year. Over 98% would spend less on health care than they do now. 4. Poverty kills more people every year in the U.S. than heart disease or cancer. Science Daily, 2018. How researchers classify and quantify causes of death across a population has evolved in recent decades. In addition to long recognized physiological causes such as heart attack and cancer, more recent research has begun to look at the contribution of social factors to U.S. mortality. In the first comprehensive analysis of such studies, researchers at Columbia University found that poverty, low levels of education, poor social support, and other factors contribute to about as many deaths in the United States as familiar causes as heart attacks, stroke, and lung cancer. Overall, 4.5% of U.S. deaths were found to be attributable to poverty. Great. I went a little faster than I would recommend a novice goes, and I can actually nah, I'll leave that in there if I have the time for it. Okay. Yeah, I could probably slow that down quite a bit and aim for that being about 4 minutes. So what I recommend is I would shoot for reading your case in about 30 seconds less than the maximum allotted time limit, because stuff will happen and the time limit is a limit and you don't want to change your pace. Okay. We are pretty much done with that. I kind of feel like I wanted to do the second contention and make a whole case, but one, I feel like at that point when I make a complete AF case, I'd have to make a complete neg case, and that's a lot more work. But if you want me to, I'll do it. And I also feel like I got the gist across. There's the outline for the second contention that I recommend, and you can work on it. You can figure it out. I might help. I don't know. That's it. We make videos. Ask us to make something. When we first made this channel, we were thinking about making essentially a video textbook, just going through every debate concept. But that got really boring, and we don't get paid to do any of this, and we don't really, I don't know, the people who are complete beginners to debate, frankly, tend not to spend a lot of their time looking up debate resources and doing independent research on how to get better at debate. And so what eventually ended up happening is people would just ask us more advanced questions or more specific questions. And that is a lot more fun. Not just because the content is less basic, but because it's just a lot more motivating to make a video when you know that someone is specifically asking for it, when somebody is specifically waiting for your answer. So I invite you to do that, and I hope this has been helpful and not painfully boring. Okay, bye.